What is wonderful about great literature is that it transforms the man who reads it towards the condition of the man who wrote. These beautiful words are by none other than the E.M. Froster. Greetings of the day, everyone. I'm privileged to welcome you all into the third edition of Orange Tea Literature Fest, organized by SGR Knowledge Foundation in association with GH Raisoni University, powered by Raisoni Group of Institutions. I'm Neha Tadlani, delighted to be your anchor for today's session, Journey of Indian Horror Genre and the Relevance of Ghost Hunter Revolutionary Gaurav Tiwari by Mr. Abhirup Dhar in conversation with Mr. Tushar Muley. Mr. Abhirup Dhar is the author of the Bread series. The Belvoir Brook haunting stories are magical and once again with love. His latest book is Ghost Hunter Gaurav Tiwari, which set a record while being acquired for screen adaptation before its release. All his horror outings have topped the bestseller charts and have met with tremendous acclaim. He is also a screenwriter now. Midday calls him the most acclaimed name in the Indian horror writing. It is an honor to have you with us, sir. And this gets even more delightful as we have Mr. Tushar Muley, who will be conversation with him as the moderator. Mr. Tushar Muley is an associate trainer at Dale Carnegie, India. So has 28 years experience in the field of training and development for corporate and academic dealings with leaders, managers, faculty members, students, and CBSE teachers. Sir is co-authoring a book on employability skills for promising professionals. He constantly works for the betterment of students and professionals. He keeps writing articles on motivation and skill development training for students. Sir is an ardent follower of Indian history and loves to write Hindi poems and satires. He did several moderations at teachers' debate competitions, panel discussions with industry experts. I once again welcome you, Abhirup sir, and I welcome you, Tushar sir. Also, before moving ahead, I would like to take a moment and acknowledge the support of Westland Publications, as the association is valuable to the OCLF. So, dear audience, you are about to experience a conversation between two very dynamic individuals. So, without skipping a moment, I humbly invite Tushar sir to lead us ahead. Over to you.
Thank you, Neha. Thank you for that introduction. I'm sure that Mr. Abhirup and me, both of us, would like to convey you thanks.
Absolutely.
In fact, I was looking forward for this opportunity, Mr. Abhirup, because there are lots of things. When it came to me as a topic, probably you actually stole the heart even before I could meet you. Reason being, the topic and the area and the genre where you are actually working right now is something which is not very much touched upon. And that's the reason I had lots of questions. Probably they may be sounding as a layman's question, but that's the kind of curiosity you generated with share your presence of the screen when I was going through the mails. In fact, I have lots of questions to ask to you. My very first question to you would be, which is a long one, probably I expect a longer answer as well, because when I see your entire work, so I've seen that the Calcutta-born boy stayed in various cities and towns of India, subsequently became a banker, professional person, and now in Mumbai. Not only that, started his journey of writing from a book on modern day relationships. Later on, it is for, you enter into a horror zone. So far, you have written 6 books, which includes magical stories. And there are 4 good horror books you have already written. And 2 of the books are there in printing now with publishers and are waiting to hit the stands anytime. So this is the way you have, grown. This has been your journey. Not only that, you have been a chart topper. I've gone through your profile and I realized that the kind of waves you have created in this particular genre and the way your books are accepted and read by the readers. Now you are also writing the screenplay and the web series and whatnot. What a wonderful journey, in fact, it is. I would like to also portray this particular thing here, that even a reputed newspaper like Midday has considered and acknowledged you as the most acclaimed name in Indian horror writing. How has been the journey? That's the question.
Thank you, Tushar, for the question. A long question indeed, and I'll also not be very specific and precise since it deserves a long answer. Thank you, Neha, for the lovely introduction. Thank you, OCLF, for having me. Would like to thank Westland Books as well. Uh, it's a very difficult question, if you ask me, Tushar, because summing it up in a few words is the most difficult thing I have to do each and every time I'm asked this question. And
Please.
each and every event I attend, each and every lit fest I attend, this is one of the questions for sure, because I'm not a full-time writer, and people are inquisitive that how do you juggle it all. You're a full-time banker, you are a full-time professional writer, and this is happening, that is happening. How do you do it? So yes, the most important thing is that I've always been a writer. Ever since I was a child, I
Okay.
was very passionate about writing. I used to write for the school magazine. I used to write for a few local newspapers. And then, when I graduated to college, I started writing. I started blogging rather. That was golden age of blogging, and we used to blog a lot. I began blogging. I used to review movies on certain portals. I used to review books on certain portals, and then the platforms got better over the years. And during there was a break. There was a break between my postgraduate course and my first job in 2010. It was a break of 4 months, and I was sitting at home. There was nothing to do, and I thought that why not use it productively and do something which makes me happy. Then I thought to write a book just for the sheer joy of it. Not to get published. It was never in my mind to be a published author. Just thought I'll write that book. And
I
I wrote
like
that
the
book,
title as
which
well. I like the title as well. Please
yeah.
continue.
So I wrote that book for the sheer joy of it, once again with love, and I kept it to myself. That was in 2010. 5 years later, I again began reviewing movies for certain portals, and then I shared this manuscript with a few friends. And they told me it strikes a chord and it's so much fun, it's so much relevant, the characters are relatable. Why don't you become a published author? You know? And I said, fine, let me try to understand if I can become a published author if you say so, And then I started uh, talking to people. I started contacting people through Facebook, which is a very good medium, to network if you use it well. I always say this, social media is a vice unless you use it well and use it for some purpose. And then once again with love happened. I was an amateur then, and I learned from my mistakes as well. And I have no qualms about accepting the fact that there have been a few mistakes in the initial days of my writing career. But I came out strong, and then Stories Are Magical happened, which was an anthology of its first kind. It had 6 different stories of 6 different genres in one book. And then I delved into horror, which is my favorite genre. Why horror happened later? That's a very interesting question. One of my books, The Belvoirbrook Haunting, was supposed to be my first book.
Okay.
I had actually written this story when I was in school, and I was thinking of getting this published first, but it was not materializing well on paper, on Word rather, at that point of time. And then I thought that fine, let me publish once again with love, since it's a simpler story. So for horror, I believe you need a certain kind of maturity. If you don't have that kind of maturity for horror, it does not do well. And it was only when I decided that I can delve into horror now, which is a genre I want to explore, I came up with Hold That Breath, and surprisingly, it topped all the bestseller charts.
Very right.
It happens to be a big, big, big hit, if I have to term it that way, in terms of horror and book, and it gave a lot of visibility to the horror genre, to the Indian horror genre, and the rest is history, Tushar. So I kept exploring horror a little more further. Did Belvoirbrook Haunting after that with the same publisher. Then came Hold That Breath 2, and now it's Ghost Hunter Gaurav Tiwari with Westland Publishing Publications. It's been a good journey, and 4 books in horror. One of the stories in Stories Are Magical was also horror. I have another book in queue with the publishing house Rupa. That's also horror. And then there is another book I'm writing, and my lit agent Suhail Mathu from the Book Bakers has already begun pitching it. So looking forward, fingers crossed. So it's been a roller coaster ride, if you ask me. It's been a worthwhile ride as well.
But right, well, the kind of consistency you have kept and you've been writing in a very short span, probably you come out with these things. It definitely the passion that speaks.
Yes, I'm very passionate about writing, and that's been there for years, 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 and years since I was a child. So that
Uh,
was the idea behind getting a book out, you know,
okay,
as a published author, because money was never in my mind, to be very honest. I still don't write for money. Things are happening, that's a different thing, but then I still don't write for money. I write for the sheer joy of writing and you know being engrossed in the stories I create and the world I create. That's the only
okay,
reason I
that's
write.
great. That's great. That's great. But there is one question which always, if I am permitted to say, haunted me since yesterday.
Okay.
And that particular question is related to the genre what you have chosen. Because I find that even if you look at the movies and the work done by various authors, we'll definitely discuss as the discussion goes on.
Absolutely.
You preferred a very niche area where you are, you started writing on the horror part. That is something which struck. What was the motivation? What fascinated you? How did you turn to this direction?
Tushar, firstly, I'm a big horror buff, ever since I was a child. So
Okay.
I had different hobbies. People have hobbies of playing cricket and, soccer and football and whatnot, swimming. I had very peculiar habits. Writing was not a peculiar habit, of course. It's definitely a very fruitful habit. But I had other habits of visiting haunted places all by myself. I was very intrigued by horror and supernatural and the paranormal, ghost spirits when I was a child. And even then, I used to write horror stories. Fine.
Okay.
And even then, I used to, as a child, I used to watch Ramsey movies. That's what I
Oh,
grew up on. And
right.
my parents were very worried. That this guy, he's not watching romantic films, or he's not watching, comedies, or he's not reading comedies or romantic, books. He's into horror. He's watching Purana Mandir and Dark Bangla. And he's a child. You know, they were worried about me. They were literally worried about me. But that's what I liked. I loved that. I loved Ramses at that point of time. Then Z Horror Show happened. Unhoney, that was re-Christianed as, Z Horror Show was re-Christianed as Unhoney. So I was a big, big, big horror buff. And when I thought that I am good enough a writer now and I can think of delving into horror, let me take a risk, because money is not in my mind. Even if it fails, even if it does not strike a chord, I have nothing to lose. I have
True.
nothing to lose because I'm a full time banker and I'm writing for my passion. So let me just try. And then I chose horror, and Hold That Breath happened. Very difficult genre, very different genre. People hardly write it in India. Even why just write it? People hardly make horror movies in India. It's a very niche genre, very
True.
untapped genre. But it's got a pro and con to it. The pro is that since it's a niche genre and an untapped genre, if it does well, you get a lot of limelight. And that happened with Hold That Breath, and then now subsequently Ghost Hunter Gaurav Tiwari. The con is that people like to ridicule it a lot in India. Even if
True.
it's a well-made movie or it's a well-made, well-written book, people want to point out some mistake or the other, and they want to make fun of it. They want to mock it, for some reason or the other. They want to show that they're very brave. This kind of a mindset is still there in India, I believe. But overall, it's definitely the time for horror. If you also look at the Netflix shows and the OTT shows, you'll see a lot of focus, coming up in horror now. And even the books. Earlier, we were only focusing on regional literature. There were a few writers who wrote horror, but then in regional languages. Now it's also changing in terms of English literature. Tushar.
Right. Uh, in fact, before I get to this particular question, there are many questions related to this regional and English
Yeah,
horror literature.
absolutely. I think this is a very important point for you as well, because
Certainly,
you
I'm
are
very
precisely a Hindi writer. You
yes,
love to
yes.
write in Hindi.
But someone as young as Neha is also listening to us, and probably she is going to make a career. I need to ask this question to you. How do you balance? As you said, you're a full-time banker and you are full-time writer. You're writing for your passion. We all have 24 hours in the day. How do you balance this entire thing?
Very difficult to balance your passion with your profession. So, And moreover, I live in Mumbai where traveling is a big mess. So,
True.
I leave early, I come back late, and I spend some time with my family. I have my dinner. I do not watch TV. That's what I've made a habit in the last 2.5 years. I do not watch TV at all. I watch OTT. I watch movies. I watch good shows, but not TV. I'm not into television at all. At least in the last 2 years, I haven't switched on the TV at all. That helps, number one. Number two, I write at nights. I don't sleep much. you know I am not an insomniac. I love my sleep, but then I kind of postpone that to the weekend. That's when I make up for my sleep. So on a daily basis, I sleep for 5.5 hours, and I
Oh,
write mostly at night after 12 o'clock. That's when I think I'm at my creative best, and that's also the best time to write horror.
that's the
So
atmosphere actually.
yes, atmospherics and all that stuff. So I have a lot to imagine at that point of time. So I write between 12, 12:30 or 1 o'clock. That's when I write.
Oh,
It does not happen daily, to be honest, Tushar, because writing, it has to be a very organic process.
true.
You can't just
Again,
push and write something just for the sake of it. So I don't write often, but then I switch on my laptop daily. Even if I don't have something in my mind, I switch on my laptop and I stare at the screen. I stare at the Word file, and that does not help then. It helps later for sure. So
oh,
maybe
great.
it's like an inculcating of some discipline in your life. That's also very important. Time management and discipline is also very important to be inculcated in life.
Right, 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 right. So as I see that there are very less number of writers in this particular genre, and a very even if you look at the total number of movies or total number of book published or movie produced, a very little percentage of these movies are falling into this particular genre.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
would like to know that how has been the journey of this horror genre? How is it shaping up? How has been this journey?
So the journey has been good. I'll not say very good. It's been good in terms of what Indians want to see and want to read. So if I have to compare this with the international scenario, there are so many subgenres in horror. Okay, there is gore, there is gothic horror, there is non-supernatural horror, there is splatterpunk. A lot of subgenres are there in horror, and horror is a passion internationally. People are crazy about horror. Internationally, you will have a horror book every week. You'll have a horror movie release every week. You just search on Google and you'll find so many books and movies internationally which are falling in this genre, and the subgenres, zombie genre. So many things are there. But in India, we relate horror with a specified thing only, that it has to be about ghosts, spirits, demons, scary faces, which is not the case.
Absolutely. That's how it
Number
is.
one.
That's
So
how
there is
it
a
is.
mindset problem in India that people don't want to see much of horror or read much of horror. They want to restrict themselves to a specified area itself, which has its pros and cons. I agree. And that is why we are not being able to move out of our comfort zones. Talking about the movies, talking about the books, we have restricted to paranormal horror, supernatural horror, and to an extent, psychological horror has been tapped, right? Because there is not a market for horror here. It's a very niche segment already, and the subgenres
True.
are much more niche. That's one of the reasons. How has the journey been for the literature point of view and the movie point of view? I'll talk about both, because when I talk about horror, I like to talk about it as a whole. So literature, regional literature has been really good once upon a time. There have been some fantastic writers like I'd like to point out Satyajit Ray, Leela Majumdar. Satyajit Ray, someone I hold in very high regard. Not just as a filmmaker, I think he was a fantastic storyteller, and he wrote some brilliant stories, and some of them are ghost stories, and they had some mind blowing concepts. Then there was Ratnakar Matkari and Narayan Dharap from Marathi literature. So many other writers, they did well and they wrote good stories regionally. Uh, Internationally, of course, there has been Stephen King. There has been R.L. Stein for the kids, someone I grew up on. Then I graduated to Stephen King. In India, not many authors wrote horror in English, except for maybe Ruskin Bond, who wrote horror intermittently, not a full-fledged horror writer. But then even his horror is more for the childrens. It's
True.
got I've met him, and I have huge respect for Ruskin Bond, sir, because he's the cutest old man I know. You know, but he writes horror rather for kids, for children. And you'll find sad ghosts, frustrated ghosts, angry ghosts, happy ghosts, more like the Casper variety. So the scary horror did not really happen with him. He didn't really write scary horror. Some atmospherics here and there, but then that spooky, scary horror was never there. So things have begun to change now. There are a few horror authors apart from me as well, and then Hold That Breath happened in 2019 and gave a whole lot of limelight to this genre. And I also basked in it. I was a little happy. Did not let success go to my head, to be very honest. Once that happens, Tushar and Neha, I think that's when your downward spiral begins, and I see that happening with a lot of writers and authors. A little success that goes to their head, and then they can't just focus on their writing, and that's when the downward spiral begins. So yes, the journey has been good. I'll not say great, but a lot of things are in store. I personally am trying my best to bring a change to this particular genre and change the mindset of people. But yes, we haven't yet tapped the subgenres in horror. That will take some time. That will take some time. Sure.
Because there is some kind of taboo attached, even if you discuss it home and if you talk about the horror films and if you tend to talk about these things, probably most of the time you stop talking about this. Nobody allows you to talk further. And most
So
of the time,
that's, I don't know why, because I'll tell you something. Valentine's Day is okay, international festival, but there is something called Bhoot Chaturdashi in India. And it is a day dedicated to ghosts, spirits, and demons. It's believed that 14 earthen lamps need to be lit in your house. It happens one day before Kali Puja, right? Just happened a few days ago. So it's the Indian Halloween. So I don't know why this taboo, because we have a day dedicated to the ghost spirits and we believe in them. So it's a day dedicated to them, and it's believed that it's the day when the ghosts and spirits are free to roam around the earth. And the 14 earthen lamps are lit because it's believed that 14 forefathers or your ancestors come to visit you that day. So I don't know why this taboo. I think it's only because people, feel it's superstitious. But I believe superstition is something. Reverend Gaurav Tiwari had clearly quoted this. Superstition is something which happens when you have lack of proof. But now we have a lot of proof that there is a life after death. There is something called the spirit world. There is something called the other world, as I call it. So there is something, and we cannot ignore it. But we should not poke it as well. There is no need for us to call spirits and demons and ghosts. Let them be, let us be. There is a world which runs parallel to ours, and that is the other world. That's where the spirits and demons dwell, and that's a phase after death. They are carrying a lot of baggage, and that's a phase after death. That's just before they reincarnate. And there are some spirits and ghosts, I believe, who are still attached to the physical world because of some unfulfilled desires. So there are spirits, there are ghosts for sure, and there is a scientific way to approach it and prove it. That's what the paranormal investigators at Indian Paranormal Society, and that's what precisely what Reverend Gaurav Tiwari did. you know so there is proof that they are there and they exist in the afterlife. There should be no taboo, if you ask me. The taboo is completely man-made, and we should be free from such taboos and superstitions.
and as you rightly said, that definitely there are, our mythology also somewhere reckon these things. They have acknowledged it. It is not that, probably maybe later posts where there is a conflict of rational and irrational beliefs, and that's why the taboo arrived. I don't know, but probably you can throw some light on it. Is it a conflict between rational and irrational beliefs?
I think it's a conflict between science and religion in a way maybe. But again, when paranormal investigators go out on field and they investigate a house or an area, they have got scientific instruments with them: EVP, EMF recorders, infrared cameras, night vision cameras. They don't see ghosts, they don't see spirits. It does not happen like that. They don't see a lady in white or a lady in black gown. Doesn't happen like that. They go to a haunted house, supposedly haunted house, with this belief that there is no ghosts, you know, And if the instruments prove us wrong, we will agree that there are ghosts. But that's the kind of investigation they do through the scientific instruments. So that can't be wrong. you know Maybe if you don't see ghosts, you can say that I have not seen ghosts, so I don't believe in them. I have never seen a ghost myself. I've tried umpteen number of times. I've not seen a ghost. But when you have a scientific instrument to prove that there are energies around us, who are we to disbelieve? you know
Okay. Probably one question which I can definitely put, as you said, scientific instruments available. So what kind of these instruments are?
So these are, it's mentioned in my book as well, but I've tried to refrain from a lot of jargons. I've tried to make it as,
Okay,
reader friendly as possible. But
absolutely.
there are EVPs, which are electronic voice, recorders. Then there are infrared cameras, night vision cameras, EMF, electromagnetic fields. These are basically different kind of instruments which they carry with them, and it's all about how the energies react to these instruments, or how they react to what questions you pose to them, and they answer. Maybe they'll answer you with one beep or two beeps, something of that sort. But it's not that they'll show themselves. It does not happen like that always. But yes, in the book that I've written, I've taken a few creative liberties so that the readership is a little interesting and engrossing. Because if I only mention about the instruments and EMF and EVP, people will get bored. So I'll give you a small example. The Conjuring movies, if you have watched, right? It's about Ed and Lauren Warren, who were famous paranormal investigators. Do you think what you see in the Conjuring movies are all true? Have that happened? Yes, they have happened, but then they have not seen the ghosts like it's shown in the movies. There are creative liberties which James Wan, the director, whom I have huge admiration for creating a horror universe, has taken. And when you write a book or when you direct a movie, you have to take certain creative liberties, or people will get bored. You know.
Right. In fact, my next question is based on this only. As I understand that one of your book is already adopted for
Being adapted,
cinema.
yes. It's been acquired by
Right.
Mr. Sunil Bohra, who's the producer of
Right.
Gangs of Wasseypur, Tanu Weds Manu, Shahid, and many other, prominent movies. So it's going to be adapted very soon, and the director would be someone from Scam 92, the web series which was very famous. The writer also is from Scam 92, so we're looking forward to it. Fingers crossed.
But I have a question here, and probably I'm standing on your side when I'm asking this question.
Okay. Yes.
This question is like in book, when you are writing, you're putting all your skills, all your imagination, all your innovation in place, and you're creating that entire scene. Now you're leaving it to the readers to read and imagine on their own. Now there is nothing physically available, but we are imagining. Even if you're talking about a haunted place or a fort or something of that sort, we are having our own imaginations. But moment it gets, you start making a cinema out of it, there are definite limitations available because people are not able to go to that particular level. There are various hindrances. So many times, don't you think that probably the contents of the book are not getting a justice when it comes to cinema, where it portrayal is done? So I'm standing on your side when I'm asking this
No,
question.
no, absolutely. It's a very interesting question, and it's of course believed that the movie or the web series, which is adapted from the book, is never as good as the book. There have been few examples and few exceptions for sure, but most of the adaptations are never as good as the book. But there are challenges in both the mediums of storytelling. For me, a book and a movie or a web series are both mediums of one particular thing, storytelling. you know One is
Right.
a visual storytelling, one is more of the narrative kind, which you leave to the reader's imagination, like you very rightly put, right? So when you write a book, there are certain limitations. Why do I
With the books or the movies, you were on that particular area.
So, like, I just mentioned that we talk about the movies or the web series, they're never as good as the book they're adapted from. This is what is believed. There are a few exceptions, but then very few and far between. And for me, both are mediums of storytelling. The visual medium is a different thing. The narrative medium is a different thing, but both have their own set of challenges, and I'll come to that. So when you write, why do I call horror the most difficult genre? Because the characters have to be relatable, and in horror it's very difficult to have relatable characters. Very, very difficult, because most of the people have not gone through or faced these supernatural occurrences. Number one. Number two, we have to be accessible. We just can't write horror in India which people can't relate to, right? Number three, if I talk about horror writing, when you read a book, two things are missing, and that's because it's not a movie. The background score, which is of immense importance in a horror movie, can never get that in a book. Also the jump scares, which is not always needed in a movie, but then you can't really have that in a book because the reader perceives a scary scene in a different way. What might be scary for you might not be scary for me.
True.
What might be scary for me might not be scary for you.
In
So
fact,
these are the challenges in writing a book. If I talk about showing it on the visual medium, there are a set of challenges for sure. Number one, you have to make a movie or a show for the audiences. So there again, the commercial part comes into importance, and you can't really show something which does not work in India. Gore, for instance, or splatterpunk. These things will not work in India. There is a very niche market for it. So they'll not be able to do justice to such genres and subgenres, because even a zombie genre, for example. So Go Goa Gone was a zombie comedy. It did average business, but that's it. Where are the zombie movies after that? There are no zombie movies after that. So you have to show something which is palatable and which is accessible, which the audiences want to see. Again, if you show too much of haunted houses and exorcisms and possessions, that will be termed cliche. But that's also got its own set of challenges. So you have to kind of overcome those challenges and make a good product. Even if it's a simple story, you can tell it differently. If it's a different story, tell it simple. That's how it is.
okay. Right. In fact, I have one more question to ask. Like whenever we talk of horror, most of the time we take it or mistake it as supernatural element involved.
We touched upon this in the initial few questions, but
yes. So my question related to this is that when it comes to the real life challenges which mankind is coming across day and night, say for example the pandemic, and initial
very good observation
months of this, will it be counted as horror?
Absolutely, it can be counted as horror. So I remember during the pandemic when it struck, and the initial days, February 2020, I believe, end of February 2020, I believe. The initial days when there was a lockdown, and everything was shut down. I remember we had to stock up a lot of food items, and we were getting accustomed to a lot of things. So my wife and I, we visited the nearby Big Bazaar departmental store, which is a stone's throw away from where I reside. It was completely empty. We went in and it was completely empty. And my wife was like, bad days are here. And I was like, wow, this is a horror buff's paradise. So I was completely enjoying it because we get to see this in international movies, right? I mean, the zombie movies or the apocalypse movies. So these are a part of horror. The pandemic is a very good example of, how horror can be, apart from being about ghosts, spirits, and demons. I love ghosts, spirits, demons, and exorcisms and possessions. But then, apart from this as well, psychological horror, which we have tapped into. If I talk about movies like Con, was a very good example of psychological horror, or Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho was a very good example of psychological horror. So we have done that in India as well. Con is a very good example, according to me. It is a thriller, but it's also psychological horror, with a twist. But we have not got into something like the apocalypse movies, or gothic horror, or splatterpunk, or gore, something of that sort. We have not done, but I understand why, because there is no audience for that. There is a very limited kind of an audience for that. That must be the reason, according to me, Tushar.
Yeah, that was the point. In fact, in the beginning also, that probably this particular genre, the audience is always limited. With the rise of
It is
population,
already limited,
consequently,
but
film
I
screen.
also believe that with more shows, during the pandemic, a lot of things happened. I'll tell you why. Number one, people sat at home for months. Some people sat for years, for almost a year. Even people are sitting at home even now. There are people. I personally had a work from home option for 2.5 months. I was at home, and I got a lot of time to write. And made a lot of progress during that time. But a lot of good things happened. Number one, people got accustomed to reading as well. Even if the paperback was not available, people started reading on Kindle. Okay, and they started trying out different genres because even a romantic genre fan thought that romance bahut par liya. Let's go for something apart from romance, or Netflix or Prime or the OTT platforms, Hotstar. People began watching shows and movies, and they started exploring other genres as well. Someone who watches romance tried to watch Bly Manor or maybe Haunting on Hill House, some kind of genre which does not interest them. And I believe that has been a good change, because now people might be a little more open to the horror genre. I feel so.
Right. Is it the pandemic which gets the credit to an extent?
It yeah, to an extent, yes, yes, to an extent, yes.
Right. Okay, wonderful. Coming to the, coming to your book, in fact, the latest book, what we are going to discuss for a while. I'm talking about the ghost hunter Gaurav Tiwari, Reverend Gaurav Tiwari. What is it all about? And what do you want to let your viewers know or your readers know through this particular book? And you did mention about the Indian Paranormal Society. Do let me know. It's a long question again, but
So,
the book
Gaurav
you want
Tiwari,
to
or
convey.
Reverend Gaurav
Yeah,
Tiwari,
right.
as we all know him, he was the first paranormal investigator in the country, first professional paranormal investigator in the country, and he pioneered the paranormal investigation field, in India. So, the most important point, Tushar, and this was the reason why I thought to write a book on it in a way. Of course, I also followed him when he was alive, and his death, his mysterious death in 2016, came as a shock to me as well because I used to follow his shows, MTV Girls Night Out, and the shows he used to do. Uh, he was a non-believer. He did not believe in ghost spirits. You'll be shocked to know this. And he was 23 and he was training to be a commercial pilot in Florida. And a few unnatural occurrences happened with him. And then he started questioning his own beliefs, right? And he started exploring his passion. And then he got trained by the best, Mr. Doug Kelly. And then he worked abroad as well. And then he came back to India to make a change here. To start Indian Paranormal Society, he founded it in the year 2009, which was the first, which is the first paranormal research organization. Uh, and he had a team in place. He built it from scratch. He built it from scratch. He contacted people everywhere, interested people who wanted to work with him. And then he didn't have it easy. He a lot of obstacles. Soon he was the media's favorite boy, the blue-eyed boy. He got a lot of media coverages and all. It did not mean that he had a lot of money to run the show. A lot of obstacles and a lot of difficulties he had. And his team lives his dream and vision right now as we talk. Indian Paranormal Society. It's got Meghna and Siddharth from Mumbai. Rith is also from Mumbai. There's Mohan Kattimani, Raj, who is the operations head and who was a very close friend of Gaurav Tiwari. He is based at Delhi. Then there is Alan Tiller, Rob Demarest, Ray Jordan, a lot of people, abroad as well, who Gaurav Tiwari worked with in a show called The Haunting Australia, which was a very famous show. It's still available on YouTube. So they have actually investigated almost 5,000 cases, Some of them are reported, some of them are not reported. And out of those 5,000 cases, I have handpicked the most spine-chilling cases and talked about them and written them, researched on them in Ghost Hunter Gaurav Tiwari. But it's not just about the cases; it's also about Reverend Gaurav Tiwari, and I've touched upon his life and also his mysterious death. I've touched upon a lot of things which the media discussed about. But it's basically a tribute to Reverend Gaurav Tiwari and the work he did. And end of the day, it's a tribute to horror, and maybe the best tribute that I could give to horror, according to me.
Right. And in fact, when I was going through the abstracts, I realized that probably you did mention that the death was quite mysterious and not sure whether it's a.
Yes, it was a lot of controversy, and someone told me the other day during an event, it said that you've got a controversy here, and the book will do it. I said, have I ever talked about the controversy? I have not. Even in the book, I have touched upon it. I've not even talked about the controversy because I believe a writer should understand that a book will not sell or reach out well due to controversies. It's only the content which is king. So I've not touched upon the controversy, but I've touched upon his mysterious death. And yes, there are many theories to his death, which people like to talk about even now. But let's just stay away from that. We don't know exactly what happened. We can have this theory, that theory, n number of things to talk about. But why pinpoint and tell you that this is the reason he died? Why? If I wasn't there, why will I tell you that? But I've done a lot of research and I do know the reason, and I've touched upon that.
Okay. Another thing is, let us talk about we talked about the journey of the horror genre. Let me know through your eyes, with your views, that what is the future of horror genre, and how do you see the movie makers, the writers, the viewers, the readers, how would they make their ways towards this particular genre? How do you foresee this now?
I see it. See, I take things in my stride. If I have to tell you that it's going to be very hunky dory, I might be wrong, but I am an optimist. I'm not a pessimist. Nature wise, I'm an optimist. So I'm a very optimistic person, even in terms of my books and the web series I'm writing and the book which is being adapted, Ghost Hunter. I'm very optimistic. That's the way I am. I can't be a pessimist. So I think things are going to be bright. Things have been good. See, talking about movies, there have been the Ramses era. They made movies on shoestring budgets and gave the superstars a run for their money at one point of time. Then Ram Gopal Verma came into the picture with a movie like Raat in '92, which is among the best movies according to me, which did not get its share of recognition at that point of time. Then he later made a movie like Bhoot, which was actually a remake of Raat itself. It did well, and then he really did well. Mr. Vikram Bhatt, who endorsed Hold That Breath too, uh, among the most prominent filmmakers and someone I really respect. He made a movie called Raz in 2002, and never had I seen such craze for a horror movie. I recall the craze among the family audiences for a horror movie was palpable. The music caught on, and the movie did exceptionally well. And then he followed it up with movies like 1920, which is among the best I've seen. You know, a Haunted 3D happened, a Sharpith happened. He's done some great work in horror. He's still doing some great work in horror. Some don't work, some work really well, but then he's at it. So he's someone who is taking up horror in a different way altogether. Looking forward to his next horror movie called Cold. Then there is Vishal Mahatkar, whom I'm working with, for a web series, which also I'm writing into a book. The same plot I'm making into a web series and a book. So that's a very exciting project I'm into. So Vishal Mahatkar made a movie called 3 a.m., which was a very interesting concept about paranormal investigation. You know, the script was really good. So there are directors who are actually making movies and doing it. Uh, Maybe they don't work really well, when they release, and some of them are lost opportunities. They turn out to be damn squibs, if I have to term it that way. They don't turn out to be as good as they out to be. Uh, so movies, I see it working, but I think, what is lacking in Hindi movies are good scripts. I feel so. They are still sticking to the supernatural and paranormal horror. That is okay. I understand that there are limited audiences for the genre already, and they'll not go for subgenres. They'll not go for subgenres. But even within that limitation, you can have good scripts, no? But I feel, there is a dearth of scripts or good scripts in the Hindi film industry and the film industry on the whole, in India. But there is no dearth of talent, right? So there are reasons behind it. Talking about literature, uh, regional literature did really well. There was a lot of focus, like I mentioned earlier, Satyajit Ray, Narayan Dhara, Ratnakar Matkari, Leela Majumdar, and so many other Bengali writers and Marathi writers and so many other, Hindi writers uh, did focus on horror. In English, Ruskin Bond was there. He's still there. His literature is a little, different, and it's not the scary sort. So things are moving now. There are other horror writers, but again, I believe they have to, rather we have to uh, think of interesting ideas and grab eyeballs and grab that mind share of the readers. So writing is now a different ballgame altogether. It's not the same as it was when Chetan Bhagat made a foray into writing. He got a first mover advantage in 2003 or 2004 with his first book, and a commercialization kind of a thing happened, and which has its pros and cons. So now writing industry is going through a different league altogether, for better or worse. Fine. And in a way, I'd say there is a saturation level. So when there is a genre like horror, which has not been tapped so far, it is a very fresh thing to happen, I believe. So it is a movement, and it will take some time, but we'll get there for sure.
In fact, the point that was very much there in my mind. Like, is it coming to a level of saturation even before it is being explored to the fullest strength? That's something which was there in my mind.
No, I don't think so. I honestly think that the visual medium and the writing medium both have to go hand in hand to build well towards the betterment of Indian horror genre. So when there is a movie, and it does not do well, people like to ridicule it a lot. So I always say them that even if it's a poorly made movie, look at the redeeming qualities, and do you make such fun of other genres as well? You don't, right? When it's horror, you're making fun of it. That the same tropes and same issues and same problems, So I think the mindset also has to change a bit. Like you said, it is a taboo. So maybe बचपन से यही सिखाया जाता है कि भूत पिशाच के मत हाँ निकट मत जाना. Don't go near to ghost spirits, and horror movies also stay away from it. Horror books also stay away from it. But the nursery rhymes that we listen to, they also have a very dark history. If you search it on Google, you will find there's a very dark history to each and every rhyme. So eventually, we all, even if we are not horror buffs, like I was, we were all grown up on horror in a way, indirectly. Baba Black Sheep and all these rhymes, they have a very dark history.
Oh, yes.
If you read about it, it's very interesting. And that's horror itself.
Right. And as we come to the final, round of questions, what new projects Abhirup is working on, and what should we wait for in future?
Okay. So I'll tell you what's coming up now. Ghost Hunter Gaurav Tiwari is out this year. I had 2 releases this year, and both of them have done phenomenally well. Touched. Next is a book with Rupa. It is basically a continuation of Gaurav Tiwari Ghost Hunter itself. Kind of a sequel, but it's not about Gaurav Tiwari. It's about Indian Paranormal Society. After Gaurav Tiwari's death, how they came out strong and they began, They continued living his dream and vision, and they began something new in Indian Paranormal Society, and they solved cases after his death as well. So in a way, it's a sequel. It's with Rupa Publications. There is a web series coming up which is based on Ghost Hunter Gaurav Tiwari, right? And then there is a book I'm writing which is based on the same story which I am scripting for a web series. I'm working with prominent filmmaker Vishal Mahatkar, who is the director of Blood Money, 3 AM, and many other movies he's been associated with, like Raz 2 and Avarapan, and a lot of movies with Imran Hashmi, Vishesh Films, Kalyug, so many movies I can't name them right now. Even his latest, horror short called REM, it's been shortlisted and it's won 3 international awards in film festivals abroad. So I'm looking forward to that as well. So 2 books are coming up. I'm working on, one book is already submitted to the publisher. One book I'm working on. One script I'm working on. One adaptation, which is in the form of Ghost to Gaurav Tiwari. These are the things which are coming up. And after this, I'll be writing Hold That Breath 3, which I already announced. It's a franchisee which I'm very excited about, because it's about just one thing, storytelling, nothing else. Hold That Breath series is about just one thing, pure storytelling, and that's why it excites me. And the part 3 will be the next book I'll be writing after the book and the script I'm writing now.
Okay, great. And we'll be looking forward for these things.
Absolutely.
So when I actually sum up the entire discussion, what we had, I find that there is a person who is highly passionate about the work he's doing, and he's seeing a lot of beauty in this entire thing. What is he doing? The zoner might be having, I said, it comes to be a niche zoner, but definitely there is definitely a capacity in you and maybe the contemporary writers to make it bigger zoner, so that many people will get attracted towards it with your work, the power of your work, the way you are trying to convey things. I really appreciate the way you conveyed your tribute to Gaurav Tiwari for his work, and appreciating his team for continuing that particular work. Your views are absolutely spot on. There is no gray area. They are absolutely black and white, clearly mentioned. And maybe somebody who is going to watch or watching today will definitely get some inspiration out of it. You regulate your sleep in order to balance your passion and profession. That is something remarkable, worth learning even for my age. Maybe I am the second old man you may like after Ruskin Bond.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
And probably the kind of ideas you have, they are wonderful, and the answers, the way elaboratively you gave, probably will do a lot of justice with this entire thing. Before I give it to Neha, I would like to have a few words from you. How are the efforts at our end when it comes to Orange City Festival? What do you think of it?
About OCLF Film
Yeah.
Festival. It's my first time at OCLF. Somehow I was not invited for the first 2 sessions. I don't know why. But having said that, I think it's been really good. I wish OCLF the very best. You guys are
Thanks so
doing a
much.
fantastic job, and you guys made it so comfortable. All of you. Starting from Runal, Neha, you, Tushar, all of you have made it very comfortable for all of us.
Our pleasure.
I'm not sure if being there physically would have been a little better, because it's a time when traveling is still a big question mark. But I was invited for the physical session as well. But
Absolutely.
I had a word with Westland, and they also suggested I go for the online session. But I believe the online session also has its own pros. It reaches out to more people than the physical sessions do.
And it stays live. It
It is
remains
live
for
and it stays recorded. So I believe this should continue in the next few festivals as well. So looking forward to be a part of this festival every year. If I get an opportunity, and talk about the growth of the genre each time I come over here and uh, get interviewed by you. Maybe by next year, or maybe 5 years down the line, each time I'll be here. I'll talk about some new things which are happening in horror, and you'll also know, and the viewers will also come to know about the various progresses the genre is making in India.
right. And in fact, on my screen right now, there are three faces and the logo of Orange City Literature Festival. And I could see myself and Neha, we were totally engrossed in what you are saying. Your narration is absolutely wonderful. And as it is rightly mentioned, that people, when they read your work, they find there is a feeling of nostalgia. There's something which probably you could feel it right here.
Yes, I'm
That's
a very
something I find.
nostalgic person. Yeah, and
Yes,
that
yes.
that actually reflects in my writing as well.
Yeah, and even you're speaking, the way you answered all the questions, very patiently, and even those initial glitches, you stayed along with us. That is something wonderful. My only request is I'll be taking a click of this particular screen. That's a modern day selfie for me, and which I'll be sharing with both of you. So
And
please
please share it with me as well.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. Three of us definitely have all the rights for this particular selfie, which I want to click. Right? Smile, please. So it's not a horror show. We discussed on horror. Sorry. Right. I'll be sharing this with you. And personally, Abhirup, I'm sure that I did not give any horror feelings all through. As we were discussing in the morning, it went very well, and I think I assisted in a better way.
And absolutely, it was one of the best sessions so far for me. So
Thanks so
it was
much.
a pleasure being here, and thank you for having me. Neha, so nice of you. Tushar, lovely interacting with you since morning itself. So please keep in touch and stay connected. It's a small world.
Certainly. Neha, over to you.
Thank you, Tushar sir. It was indeed an amazing conversation. And just like good things come to an end, this has come to. We learned something other than literature about which people surely didn't know. And I would like to thank Abhirup sir and Tushar sir for such a pleasant session. At the outset, we wish to get you here, you both again be equally enlightened as we are all are today. And for my dear massive audience, I'm sure that after witnessing this conversation, you all are taking home an enriched version of yourself, just as I will. Thank you for joining us today. Until I see you again, this is Neha Thabrani signing off.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Raisoni Group, a vision beyond.